we're all here for a purpose on this planet, this little planet in the cosmos. There's probably 100 million inhabited planets just in our local universe. It's just mind-boggling to think about it. But we all have a purpose, and I was fortunate enough to find out what my purpose was in a very extraordinary situation. I was living in Paris at the time, Paris, France, not Paris, Ontario, and I met a man called Stanislav Grof. He's also known as Professor Stanislav Grof. He's from Czechoslovakia. He's a psychotherapist, and he was working in the early 60s on altered states of consciousness. He was one of the pioneer researchers in LSD, in fact. But they were using LSD for psychotherapeutic purposes, not for recreation. So, all right, hands up. Anybody who's ever had LSD? Thank you. Okay, right. Well, I had it when I was 19 too. But anyway, this is nothing to do with LSD. Stanislav Grof had to stop using LSD for his research because it became illegal. But it was research in altered states of consciousness. So anyway, I met him in Paris, and he had developed a new method of traveling in altered states of consciousness, and he developed it from a shaman technique, and it's essentially hyperventilation technique. And he called this technique holotropic breathwork. You know about this? Yeah. Okay. So he asked me if I'd run workshops with my then partner in Paris, and I said, well, I can't run a workshop as a holotropic breathwork practitioner until I've actually been a patient, because I want to know what these people are going to be going through when they go through this process. So my first session was as a patient. I laid down on a mattress. I had a mask on my face. The mask is just so that you don't get distracted. And it's a very courageous process. You have to essentially hyperventilate. So it's just, for as fast as you can. And you get to a point where your body starts freezing up. You can't feel your hands. At this point, most people stop because they become afraid. But in all the years of Stanislav Grof's work, nobody ever died in a holotropic session. So I had this fact in my head. I thought, well, I'm not going to die, but I need to go right through this process. So I pushed past the fear, and I went into a completely different state. Once I got past that fear barrier and I kept going, instead of giving up and stopping, I literally left my body. Up until that time, I'd had my hands felt that they were in two chains. I had two chains around my wrists and I couldn't move. And it was a reflection of my own childhood. I grew up in a very unhappy family. My mother and father broke up when I was 4 years old, and I never saw my mother again. I reconnected with her recently, by the way, but this was a long time ago. And I was brought up by a very, very wicked stepmother. You know, the classic wicked stepmother types. I don't know how many of you have had wicked stepmothers, but this lady did not like me or my sister at all. So she gave us hell. She spent most of her life telling me that I was a piece of shit. Excuse me, the beep. Excuse the language. But so I grew up as a child feeling that I was just like the worst thing on earth. But I had the gift of music in me. I built my first guitar when I was 8 years old out of pieces of wood in the garbage, and I was determined to play music. So music literally saved my life. So back to the workshop. So I'd been under this illusion of being inferior, totally inferior for most of my life. And so I started to leave my body. I pushed through the fear. I went into the altered state of consciousness. Something really, really extraordinary happened, and this is absolutely true. It may sound like a movie or a fantasy, but this actually happened. I met something which I can only explain as my spirit guide, or one of my spirit guides. I saw, not with my eyes, but I perceived a blue androgynous electric being floating above me. And it was real as this bar is here, as you people are real. It was absolutely there. I was not under LSD because it was a process that Mr. Groff had developed this process to give the same feeling as LSD, but without being under the power of a drug. So I knew that I was on a mattress. I knew that I was in reality. So I felt safe. And there was somebody sitting next to me holding my hand too, as part of the workshop. So this being started to talk to me and said, look, Chris, you have been under the illusion that you're an inferior person for most of your life. I'm here to tell you that you have a mission like every human being on this planet. Your mission is to bring truth and beauty into the world using the universal language of music, which you have that gift to do that. And I started to feel, for the first time in my life, I started to feel free. I started to cry tears of joy. And I kept saying, freedom, freedom. I was in this room in Paris with all these other people, and I was going, freedom, and all these tears were streaming down my face, soaking my mask and everything. So I was like completely ecstatic with joy. And then I said to the guide, I said, well, I would like to see the universe. What's out there? Why are we here? You know. So the guide took me on a voyage through I was going through the stars and everything. It was incredible. We got to a place in space which was void of any planets. It looked like just a pure vacuum. And I said, well, why did you bring me here? He said, well, the guide said to me, you may think that vacuum is nothing, but I'm here to tell you that vacuum is full of potential. And all it takes is the will of a creative being like yourself and will of intention to create whatever you want in that space. And my guide said, when you leave this planet, when you finished your time on Earth, which is the freshman year of the University of the Universe. Do you understand that? This is why we're here. It's our freshman year, okay? When you leave this planet, you eventually will be able to take a vacuum in space and create whatever you want with your will and intention. And I can tell you that was that whole... Eventually I came down, and the experience lasted about an hour, maybe. Eventually I came back down, but it completely changed my life. I realized that I had a mission, and I realized I wasn't a piece of shit. And I spent, from that point onwards, my creativity levels in songwriting have gone exponential. I've never had any problem. I don't write songs. I've never written a song in my life, but thousands of songs have come through me, and I'm full of gratitude for that. The divine gift of music composition. I consider music to be very important because it's a universal language. Say